Hello, you're listening to Covid-tinted Glasses with Georgina. I'll be speaking to people from all around the world about their unique experiences of the pandemic, the good, the bad, the beautiful and the downright ugly, covering topics like friendship, family, travel, work, mental health and finding love. If you'd like to join me for a chat, then get in touch at georgina_podcast@outlook.com. Hi, welcome to Covid-tinted Glasses. I'm Georgina and joining me is Marisa, MBA candidate 2021 student, currently at home at her mum's, but studying at Edmonton in Alberta in Canada. Welcome, Marisa.
Oh, thanks for having me, Georgina. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to see you. It's been a while. So why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners and explain why you are where you were and what's been happening over the last year?
Sure. So I was born and raised in Canada until I was 21. And I decided that I wanted to leave Canada, didn't really know what to do. I had a friend who was an au pair in Paris. And so he suggested that I give it a go. So I made what was more or less a dating profile online for nannies and families. And I found this great family in London who offered for me to come and stay with them for 6 months. And I have an Italian passport. So quit my job 5 weeks later. I was in England for the first time. So I ended up doing that for about a year and I got to travel a little bit. And then I started working for a post-production company. And that was at the start of 2018. So I did that for about 2.5 years, kind of bouncing around the company. During that time, I was also going to British Military Fitness, which is how I met Georgina. So we became really good pals there, and burpee buddies, more or less. And then I was working in film trailer localization when the pandemic hit. And I was furloughed rather quickly once that happened, because the whole point of a film trailer is to get people to go to cinemas. And if cinemas aren't open, then there's not really much point in having a film trailer. So I was furloughed for most of 2020. And that kind of gave me the kick in the butt that I needed to start studying for the GMAT and to start looking at maybe going back to school. So I made the decision in mid-2020 to repatriate back to Canada during the pandemic. And
so can I ask what a GMED? Is it a GMED you said?
GMAT, yeah. So that's it's like the standardized testing that you have to do to get into an MBA program.
Okay.
Lawyers, there's like the LSAT and stuff like that, and there's the MCAT for doctors. So fortunately enough, I didn't actually have to write it, which was pretty lucky for me because it's a bit of a slog. But I was fortunate enough to have good enough grades in undergrad to like help me get into this amazing program in Edmonton. So I moved back to Canada back in August during the pandemic. So I had to do the full 2-week quarantine.
Were you on a special flight or was it just a normal flight, but when you got to your destination, you had to quarantine?
Yes. So when I got to my destination, I had to quarantine, and I was fortunate enough to be at my mom's house to quarantine. So we have like a pretty nice back garden. So I could quarantine like in a bathing suit in my mom's backyard and 35-degree weather. Like it was pretty great. And yeah, I did the full 2 weeks, and the Canadian government called me multiple times to make sure that I was in fact at home.
Did you have to fill out repatriation documents to go to Canada, or was it just you just booked a flight and informed them that you were coming?
I just booked a flight. It was incredibly easy. Because I'm a Canadian citizen, there weren't too many hoops to have to jump through to get back. But I do have friends who have partners who are not Canadian citizens, and they had wanted to come back to Canada at the start of the pandemic. They themselves could come back, but their partners weren't allowed to because they weren't Canadian citizens.
So but when you got back, you were checked on regularly, it sounds like it.
Yeah, they called me maybe 4 or 5 times.
Over 2 weeks? Yeah. And we should mention where you are in Canada, because everyone will be like, 35 degrees, swimming costume.
Yeah, so it's actually funny you mentioned that because yesterday it snowed all day in April. So we get really weird weather around here. We are nestled. So right now I'm in Windsor, Ontario, which is nestled in between the Great Lakes in Canada. And so we get really intense heat in the summer and we get pretty bad winters. So like a couple of years ago, we got about -40, I think it was. And it
Wow.
was so cold that you could actually take a pot of boiling water outside and you could like throw the water into the air. And the second that it left the pot, it would like turn to snow and ice. Like it was absolutely insane. But our summers here are really, really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get
What
very.
kind of, if we go across to the UK, where does it hit the UK?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's the UK might be a bit more north, to be honest. I think I'd have to look at it.
Ah,
You definitely don't get the same weather that we do. I remember
no.
um, my first winter over in England, like everyone was saying how cold it was and they had their jackets on and I was like out in like a long sleeve and this is fine. But it's a different kind of cold, because
Yes.
obviously like England is an island and so it's
Yeah.
just it really gets you to the bone. Uh,
Yeah.
but I think it's pretty on par. Like you're
Yeah.
gonna fact check me later, and I'm sure that people who are listening will be laughing and saying like, "No, of course it's not the same," but it's not dramatically different. I don't think.
No, I mean, it was just a quick question I had, so don't worry about your answer. You were not expected to be a geography graduate as well. So yeah, you got back to Canada. You were checked in on by the government. Very good on them. And what month was it? I know you said it was I know you said it was 8 months ago or something like that. But what month was it
So it
actually?
was in August. So
Okay.
things in the UK were pretty good. So I
Mm.
think it's pretty unique because I have an experience of like COVID rules in very different countries. So back then in August, like I was able to meet up with my pals at a restaurant outside. And there was probably like 15 of us, like at a couple different tables, and we were, going around to different tables and like sharing pizzas and stuff. So it wasn't too strict.
And that was in London, yeah.
And that was in
Yeah.
London. Yeah. That was down the road from where we lived.
Yeah.
You and I both lived.
And I remember being very jealous of you being furloughed because you got your lovely bicycle. And I've always wondered what happened to the bicycle.
I had to sell it, and it was honestly a very emotional experience, which I know sounds crazy because it's a bicycle. But I think that anyone who got a bike in lockdown and had to rely exclusively on that bike for transportation can probably attest to the relationship that they had with their bike. So I had to sell it on Facebook Marketplace. But I think when I come back, I still have that person in my chat history. I might go back to them and say, can I please buy the bike back off of you?
Because actually, you did really travel around with it, didn't you? You went to Hampstead Heath, you went to Richmond regularly. And yeah, it was your lifeline in a way.
Honestly, furlough was a crazy time. I could get away with, like cycling for hours every day. So it was really, really fun. I used to go over to like up through Finsbury Park, probably like 4 times a week. So that's where my partner at the time lived. And that I think round trip to Shepherd's Bush was probably about 20 miles.
Yeah.
A lot of good cycling.
And you were also quite lucky as well, weren't you? Because you had two flatmates or one at the time. I can't remember. There were two, weren't there? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So I was incredibly fortunate with my flatmate situation in London, where I met both the girls off Spare Room, but we became very, very close, almost like sisters throughout the pandemic. And my one flatmate went to stay with her parents in Norfolk, I believe, at the start of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And my other flatmate is a doctor, and so she was in London. So at the very start of the pandemic, we all kind of looked at each other and we thought, like, okay, like, what are we going to do? Like, who's staying here? Who's going to go? And so I decided that instead of going to stay with my boyfriend, because that was a discussion, that I would stay with my my flatmate who was a doctor and kind of make sure that she was taken care of. But we had a great time, to be honest with you. We got really close and we got to do a lot of cycle trips together, and I could kind of help her out because she was stretched pretty thinly with, of course, like the hospitals being what they were.
Yeah, you definitely. I remember. In fact, I benefited from a bit of your cooking. Was it velvet cake or something? Red velvet cake.
Probably a carrot cake, although there is an obscene amount of cake baking. Since
Yeah,
I left, both the flatmates have lost good amounts of weight just because I was baking constantly.
yeah, you were doing a really good job because you really were looking after her. And I think she just graduated or got to a milestone or something because there was lots of celebrations going on. I think. Yeah,
Just did, I think it was on Thursday or Friday of last week.
yeah,
So I got to dial in from Canada, and her family in Ireland was on, and it was a big moment for her. I'm sure it was hard to be on Zoom, but she was sending
yeah,
goodies. But yeah, a lot of people are in that boat, hey, where you have to
yeah.
celebrate these big achievements in your life just online.
Yeah, and going to that with your family. So when you got back, having had quite a good time in London, difficult but okay, having sold your beautiful bicycle and flown back home, you were at home with your parents, and then went with your mum. And then when did you go to start studying?
I was here for about 3 weeks, so I was quarantining for 2 weeks of that. And then I had about a week or 10 days or so of very intense, like visiting people because I hadn't been in Canada for about a year. And then after that week concluded, I moved out to Alberta.
Perfect. And did you know anyone in Alberta or?
Yes. So my sister and her husband live there. So they are generous enough to let me stay with them when
So
I'm there.
that was great. So you were part of the family. And talking about family, which was actually where I was going to, but got distracted, you have had two family weddings or meant to have had two family weddings. Do you want to tell everyone kind of how that's been and what actually has ended up happening?
Absolutely. So my sister, Katrina, was engaged at the end of 2018, and her partner, who have been together for about 10 years now, had wanted to get married in Portugal in the summer of 2021. So everyone had booked their flights, and of course, by like May, everything had to be canceled and pushed to the summer of this year. And it's become very clear that we will not all be going from Canada to Portugal for like a wedding. So it's been pushed by another year. So we're really hoping 2022 will be our summer and it can finally happen. My other sister, I have four siblings. My other sister was engaged. She proposed to her husband in a very sweet way back in last summer in June. And they found out around February of this year that her fiance's mother is very sick.
Oh,
So they decided to get married rather quickly in order to like have the mom like ensure that she's in attendance and is feeling like well enough to participate. But unfortunately, like she like in the past 2 months since that diagnosis was made, the rules in Ontario have changed dramatically. We've gone, I think, 3 tiers back into lockdown.
wow.
Um, and so it got to the point where they were still able to get married. They got married about 9 hours north of where I am, and they
Hmm.
had a couple people there who were vaccinated, which was lucky, and they got to do a ceremony outside. It didn't snow, which was very lucky. And then we could all be in attendance over Zoom, which was nice.
So they were in the same state as you, but you could not go.
Exactly. So right now in Ontario, it's a stay-at-home order, is what they're
And that
calling.
really means stay at home. Yeah. Uh, wow. But the people that were vaccinated were allowed to go because they were vaccinated, or they just happened to be vaccinated and in the area.
Yes. So they were closer to the area in which they got married. So it was less frowned upon than us traveling like
Yeah.
all across the province because we would have had to stay overnight. And
Right.
our rules in Ontario where you can still go forward with like a marriage ceremony, you
Yeah.
aren't allowed to do any reception at all. And up until Monday, I think of this week, they got married on Saturday. You were allowed to have up to like as many people as you would like at an outdoor ceremony, as long as they could distance the 2 meters. But
Yeah.
the second that they basically say I do, everyone has to disperse.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
like no toasting. There's not
No
really
photos.
we can do. But as of Monday this week, they've changed the rules again. So things in Ontario are very up in the air right now.
So are you kind of is the are the COVID regulations managed centrally throughout the whole of Canada, or is it very much state by state? Is it called states or regions?
Provinces.
Provinces. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so province by province, it's incredibly different. So in the Maritimes, like out in Eastern Canada,
Right.
they have a complete lockdown. So people
That
can't.
would be Vancouver. That would be Vancouver, would it be?
No, so that's on the West Coast.
Ah, sorry, wrong coast.
No, no, that's great. So yeah, so Vancouver's like above California, and
Yeah.
then on the other side you've got like Newfoundland, Labrador, like Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, like all these very like Irish-esque maritime
Yeah.
maritime provinces. So people cannot travel into those provinces unless you have like a very good reason. I think it's like if you have a relative who's passing away or something like that. I have a friend in my program who is from the Maritimes, and her partner is from Ontario, where I am.
Mhm.
And they wanted to return back for Christmas, and she was approved, but he wasn't.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's very interesting in Canada right now. Like every province is incredibly different.
And obviously, because you still have contact with people in the UK, do you think it's being managed well, or are you happy there? Or would you wish you were back here? Or I think I know the answer.
I mean, it's hard to see all of my friends like having a great night at the pub right now. I think that
Yeah, that's just happened, hasn't it? So yeah.
I think the rollout of vaccines is going much better in the UK.
Mm.
Here, like in Ontario, I think that they've only just approved for the AstraZeneca vaccine to be administered to people 40 plus. Like
Right.
and I know that a lot of my friends have been given the AstraZeneca jab and that they're doing fine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been very frustrating to watch, I think.
And whilst you were in Edmonton studying, so did you go to lectures, or had that already shut down when you got there? If you see what I mean.
So I got to do 2 lectures in person.
Whoa.
So if you were to ask me how to get around the business building, I would have no idea.
Yeah.
But most of the classes are all online. I think in the spring there was talk about them doing a few of them in person, like on depending on what the curriculum is for that class, like they can make a choice about whether it's worthwhile to have it in person. We're really optimistic about fall of this year.
Because you're going to finish in December, you said. Yeah.
Yes. So December 2021.
So so you all get on Zoom, big Zoom calls for lectures and things like that. Yeah. And where are all the rest of your kind of colleagues, or where are they? Where are the rest of your peers living?
They're all over the place, to be honest with you. Most of them are definitely in Alberta and in Edmonton. There are some of them who started off in India or in France. And so we'd be taking an accounting class maybe at like 4 p.m. my time, and they would be taking it at like 1 a.m. their time.
Yeah.
And considering it's accounting, I don't know. Like I couldn't even stay up in the afternoon class, let alone in the middle of the night. There's some people in Peru, or Brazil. It's been like very incredible to see all the different people, but very straight.
Have you been able to create friendships with them, or not really, because it's literally, do you have a Facebook group or a WhatsApp or something?
Oh yeah, we have all that stuff. And the nature of an MBA program is incredibly collaborative. So this semester alone, I think I had 3 different consulting projects for different courses or different clubs and whatnot. So a lot of Zoom calls. I definitely have friends. I have dates in the diary to go and grab drinks with people when I'm back.
Yeah.
But it's very strange to have a best friend that I've only seen from, the waist up.
Yeah, that must be crazy. I guess some people will be jealous listening that you even had 2 lectures, because Amber, who I kind of spoke to the other day, she has never been into her college, full stop. So I mean, it's just crazy, isn't it? So it sounds to me like you still think you're getting value for money, even though you are studying from home. You still think it's worthwhile you doing the course.
I've definitely learned a lot. And I think that when I go back into the real world after finishing this degree, that I'll definitely be in a better place than I was in pre-degree.
Yeah.
I think that I'm getting the full value that a regular MBA would have had. Probably not. But at the end of the day, being able to say that you have studied for this degree, I think it's still incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. And in fact, you have an internship coming up, don't you, in a couple of weeks? So, and is that, oh, but that'll be online as well, presumably. Or yeah.
So I've purchased co-working space in Edmonton because I'm one of those people who loves being around other people. I love going into an office. Like I'm all about that. So I've purchased co-working space because that's still open.
Mm-hmm.
But the internship will be online.
And just to explain to everyone, the co-working space, I think that's very common in Canada and the US as well, isn't it? Where you just hire a desk in an open plan office. Is that the case?
Yes, and they actually have it in London as well. I was looking into like WeWork and I think Soho City it's called.
Yeah.
So
So maybe they're becoming more common, because I think that would be great, wouldn't it? So that you've got that to look forward to. So just to explain, how far is where you are now to Edmonton? Kind of, it's quite a long way away, isn't it?
So it depends on whether you're flying or driving.
Yeah.
So if I were to fly, I think it would probably be about 5 hours because I have to go up to Toronto first, switch planes, then I have to go across. If I'm driving, it'll probably be about 3 or 4 days.
Sorry, can you repeat that again? 3 or 4 days?
Yeah, so
mountains. I'm very excited. Sorry.
okay. So yes, there are mountains in Alberta, but you have to drive across a lot of prairies, and it's very flat. There's not much going on. It's a lot of fields of wheat, but you have to go across a few provinces to get over there.
Do you know what? I have to be honest. I feel like crying just hearing about this journey because it just sounds so exciting. Like 3 days through prairies and over a hill. I'm there. That sounds fantastic.
Honestly, one of my bucket list items is to do the Great Canadian Railroad trip, and that's when you take the train from the Maritimes all the way up to Vancouver.
Right. Okay.
I think it would.
I know the Maritimes is in the east because I learnt that, and I know that the east is east and the west is west, where Canada is. I mean, where Vancouver is.
There will be a quiz on this at the end of the podcast.
Okay. We'll all know exactly where we are. So I wanted to ask you, so what's the first thing you think you'll do once restrictions are lifted?
How big are we talking here?
It can be huge or it can be tiny.
I definitely want to go back to England and just hug all of my friends for an embarrassingly long time.
Did you get to hug them goodbye? Not probably only 1 or 2.
Oh, I did. So I got to hug my flatmates, and my best friend took me to the airport. And so she stayed with me. And I'm sure the cab driver was very confused because there was just a lot of open sobbing. You would have thought I was getting on a boat to never return, honestly. The drama. But yeah.
I mean, you had such a great time in London, didn't you? And when you said you liked being part of the office kind of dynamic, I remember you telling me how you used to do running clubs at lunchtime, and you were like the lead in organizing socials and things like that. So I can imagine that must have been a really hard thing to lose. And then suddenly not only not be doing that, not being in the office and not actually having people to bounce off at all, really, except for your flatmates.
It was an adjustment. And I like that you said, except your flatmates. I think they were exhausted by the time I left, just because they were my source of social interaction every day after going from an office of about 500 people, to really just scale it all down. But yes, I was very involved in coordinating all the charity events, all the pub quizzes, things like that. That's my bread and butter, so to speak. So I think that going back though, and just being able to see all my friends and hug them and get to plan fun trips with them, those are the first things I want to do.
And the other thing I want to talk about is you also had a little dog, or rather a large dog friend, didn't you?
I did, yes. So when about maybe a month before the pandemic hit, I had signed up for Borrow My Doggy, and it was because I missed my own golden retriever in Canada so much, who's in the other room. But I managed to find a a 12-week-old golden retriever puppy who lived down the road from me in London. And the owner sent me a message and said, like, oh, hey, like, I know you like golden retrievers. I have a puppy here for you. And I was like, am I being dogfished? Like, it's too good to be true. There's no way. And sure enough, I made friends with this owner and their cute little dog named Zatar, who at the time was just a few weeks old. And so throughout the pandemic, I used to just go and, contactlessly pick up the dog from them. And we'd go over to the park and we'd bring him back to our flat. And we just have him for like 8 hours a day.
I think that's fantastic. So, your tips for surviving the pandemic in London, what would they be?
That's a great question. I would say absolutely get a bike. Like it doesn't matter how much it costs, get a bike. Because experiencing London on a bike versus the tube or buses is a completely different kettle of fish. And it probably is one of my most fond memories of London is cycling around.
And also, I think London isn't as big as we think it is. Once you get on a bike, you realize that actually the distances aren't as huge.
No, of course not. And even just for sightseeing, like I used to do this trip up Notting Hill, like through Hyde Park, and then I'd get down to like the river and I would just go past like Big Ben, London Eye, like Tower of London, like all of these huge things, like within a few miles. Like it really does change your experience in the city.
Any other top tips for surviving the pandemic in London?
I would say to get to know your neighbors, which I think is probably a more Canadianism than people in London would like to hear. I really got to know our neighbors well during the pandemic, and I think that it just made things so much nicer. And just being able to check on people, especially the people who I knew were single, and just say like, do you want to grab a drink on the patio? Do you want me to like bring you a piece of cake? Some people are very receptive. Other people are very not okay with it. But I think that now more than ever, it's really important to reach out to people and just to make sure that they're okay.
Yeah, because I think you also, it's all coming back to me. You were putting flyers through people's doors to check they had everything they needed and things like that, which I think a lot of people did. But it sounds like you actually did try and interact a bit more with people rather than just stuffing the paper in the letterbox, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that, as you said, like I was so involved in my workplace and doing all the social things that there was a huge like gap that was left when I was furloughed. So I really threw myself into community engagement. I joined all the mutual aid groups. I did some baking for like the local police department and fire department and things like that. So it was a really nice experience to be able to feel like I was helping in some way. I also, at one point, I got through the mutual aid groups, like they were making face shields for hospitals and whatnot. So I did a few hundred of those with my flatmates. And that was all found just by like engaging in the community and talking to neighbors and whatnot. So that was one of my best experiences throughout the pandemic as well, I think, was trying to help out and give back.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So in Canada, where are you now? I'm confused. You're not in Edmonton. You're in Alberta. No, that's Alberta. Edmonton is in Alberta.
In Windsor.
Yeah. So, what tips would you give for surviving the pandemic in Canada, let's say?
Oh man. For me, one of the best things has been having some free weights and being able to just work out of my mom's basement, because you cannot go for runs when there's 3 feet of snow. So that was something new. Um,
Yeah, we forget about how much snow you actually do get, even where you are, which is kind of across from Detroit, which I learned just before we pressed record. Yay. So you're actually in the southern part of Canada. So yeah, so you still get a 3 foot of snow. So that's really interesting to hear. And obviously you have to wear a lot more clothes when you go out and you can't go in anywhere. So it's not like you can really go for like a 3 hour walk, or really, is it?
I mean, Canadians are just built a bit different, I think. I mean, like I would go to the park and there would still be people walking their dogs, and
Yeah.
people here like will have snowshoes in their home and they'll have cross country skis at home. Like those are just things that people have in their house because our weather warrants it. I guess another tip that I would have is to probably like invest in some like quality warm weather attire for outside, because I had so many catch up calls with people in my backyard around our little fire. And also like sporting equipment, because being able to cross country ski and when there's like nothing else to do or to go snowshoe is pretty incredible.
God, that sounds like bliss, because the one thing I have been missing is that I go skiing like once or twice a year, twice if I'm lucky. And the mountains, it's just like, oh, it just sounds, or just snow in general. We have had a little bit, which is great. But up in my mum's, I've been planning a whole little mini ski resort. I've got a black slope, red slope, green slope, all planned out, just no snow in the local, not in my mum's back garden, in the hills. So is there any advice you would give yourself if you could go back to the beginning of the pandemic, now that you've kind of lived through it?
I would say to really take care of your friendships and nurture your friendships more, because I think that everyone was fighting their own battle during the pandemic, and it's really easy to get caught up in your own life. But the things that have gotten me through this pandemic are my friendships. Like hands down, no questions asked. Like I speak to my friends in Canada and in England like every day, multiple times a day. And so, yeah, I would say that, to me back in March of 2020, to really make sure that I always prioritize my friendships and really take the time to nourish them.
And do you think you would have done the MBA had the pandemic not arrived?
I think I would have done it, but maybe not as soon.
Mm. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting, isn't it? So plans changed, didn't they, because of the pandemic, and some quite big decisions in your case.
Absolutely. I mean, I had always thought about doing the MBA. Two of my sisters have done it. But for me, the fact that they were saying, your grades are good enough, like we'll say that this year you don't have to write this GMAT. And then my sister in Edmonton saying, you can come stay and live with me if you do it in Edmonton. Like, I think that those factors probably wouldn't have happened if not for the pandemic. So I guess if there's one thing that I'm kind of happy it happened, like it's worked out in my favor, I think.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I have to say, it's so wonderful to see you, because I used to see you so regularly. And then obviously the pandemic hit, and then you went back to Canada. But you look really well, and good luck with your internship. And thank you so much, Marisa. Take care and see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.